Welcome to Health Matters. We're doing a series on bullying, and today we welcome Karen Kloss, Executive Director of Moose Jaw's Transition House, to share with us on bullying environments. Thank you so much, Karen, for sharing with us. Let's start with that question. What makes for a bullying environment?
Well, I believe that bullying happens in an environment where there's other forms of violence and aggression. And I think when we take a look at the society that we live in and the amount of violence that happens around us every day, we can see that violence has become very mainstream. I think most kids, by the time they reach 18, have witnessed thousands of homicides on television, whether that's been fictional or on the news. I think it was in 2009 that the Canadian General Social Survey found that 1.6 million Canadians over the age of 15 have been a victim of sexual assault, physical assault, or robbery in the preceding year. And I mean, those, of course, are very violent crimes. We know that video games and just media in general, our entertainment has become increasingly violent. And although in 2011 the Canadian Centre for Justice Statistics showed violent crime rates going down, I think we still know it's all too common. And in fact, that year they surveyed 33 cities across Canada, and Regina was number one and Saskatoon was number two for the highest severity index. So, I mean, we know that that happens in our society, and I think that it's forced us to, or it's made us normalize violence all too much. And so I think we tolerate more and more bullying environments, or bullying in our environment. And so I think that really contributes to the amount of bullying.
Some tough stats, aren't they, Karen?
Yeah.
Where does bullying happen?
Well, bullying can and does happen anywhere. I think for most of us, when you hear the word bullying, the image that's conjured in your mind is the schoolyard, big kid, little kid, and someone's getting picked on, but really bullying can happen anywhere. Simply put, bullying is when someone uses power or control to, control another person, to make them feel inadequate, to, make them feel distress, or, to cause harm to them. And so really that can happen to anyone, not just children. So environments may include school, but it may also include a workplace, institutional, social circles, family, and of course cyberbullying is another big issue. That's another environment where we're seeing more and more bullying happening.
Can you explain a bit more about the environments for bullying and who is at risk?
So the school one, like I say, most people are familiar with that, but I think one thing that's really important to remember is it can happen from preschool all the way up to post-secondary. It can happen to, at any age. I think we often assume that it's an elementary school phenomenon, that kids will just outgrow this. And, when we take the position as adults that kids, this builds character for them, I was bullied and, it's just kids being kids. I think we send the message to kids that their reality doesn't matter and their feelings don't matter, and, how they're seeing it doesn't matter. And we're telling them that there's nothing that can be done about it. You're just going to have to ride it out. And it's sad. We certainly don't want to send that message to our kids. So I think that's just an important thing to remember about that environment. When we talk about the workplace bullying environment, bullying, harassment, and I guess, again, it's one of those times where we've used the words to maybe dummy it down a little bit, because probably harassment would be a better way to define what happens in workplaces. But often there's a perceived or a real power imbalance between two or more people, and it creates a hostile work environment. So it's a place where people aren't feeling comfortable to come to work, and I think the spillover in that environment is huge when we think about not just the person that's being bullied and the people close to them, but all of the coworkers in the workplace can feel the impact, and certainly the organization itself may feel the impact. Increased absenteeism, higher turnover, more sick days, people accessing the EAP programs more, and of course that spills into client dissatisfaction as well, customer dissatisfaction. So I think there's a lot of costs to bullying in that environment, or harassment in that environment. The family environment, maybe I'll say a little bit more about that one. And again, another example where we use the word bullying to minimize the actual behaviors, and it would probably be more accurate to call it abuse. It may take emotional forms, verbal, physical, any combination of those. And I think that very often the abuser will manipulate the family relationship, or the relationship with that person, to compel them to stay and to keep the secret about what's happening because it's within the family. And often we take liberties with our family because, they're going to love you or they're going to stay together. And I think very much the abuser will do that and, in that way compel their victim to stay and keep silent about what's happening. And maybe the last one I'll expand a little bit on is the cyber environment. Yes. So certainly as our use of social media and that technology has grown, and probably exponentially over the last 10 years, so too has cyberbullying. Yes. Cyberbullies use the internet, whether it's YouTube or Facebook or Twitter or instant messaging, texting, blogging. There's just so many avenues, but they use that again to cause distress, to embarrass or slander or do harm to their victim. And although the behavior or what they're doing is very often public and can be seen by so many people, their anonymity is often intact. They can do it quite in anonymity and people won't know who's responsible. And I think it makes it that much more difficult to deal with that environment. And another one of the challenges with that environment is, of course, the fact that when you put something out there, it's out there forever. Yeah. You can't take it back. And so that environment is very difficult to change. Then once it's out there, it's out there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and in terms of who's at risk, I think really for any of those, again, anybody can be at risk, but sometimes the people most at risk might be those who are different from the group that they're with for one reason or another, whether it's their race or their abilities, sexual orientation, height, weight, for all kinds of things people are isolated. Sometimes too, if we would identify someone as being weak or unable to defend themselves, they might also be seen as a target. So,
how does a bullying environment persist?
I think very often the environment persists because the other people in the environment, sometimes we call them bystanders or observers, sometimes it's because of their inaction. We often think that the bully is the one with the power, but really it's those other people because in numbers there's power. And so it's their inaction sometimes that causes the environment to persist. So a bully has learned their behavior and they've learned that it works for them. If they get away with, if they get what they want and there's minimal or no consequences for it, then they're going to continue until they learn something else. And so it's really important. Sometimes the victim isn't in a position to stand up to the bully or stand up for themselves. So it's really important for those other people in the environment to take ownership and take responsibility for that environment and say, we're not going to tolerate that. That's not okay in this environment. We're not okay with that, and send a message to the bully. So in a school environment, that might mean the peers. In a workplace, it might be the co-workers. Sometimes it's policies, even whether that's school or workplace. Sometimes it's those things that send the message. But I think it's really important that the rest of the environment take some ownership and make a change.
Thank you so much, Karen, for sharing on this and bringing awareness and understanding so that we can take action.
Great. Well, thank you very much.